The epidemic is real.
It's not an epidemic.
We know it's an environmental exposure.
It has to be. Rampant misinformation. This is the Apparently Autistic podcast,
where we unmask the spectrum
with real voices
and real experiences.
We're your hosts, Keith Holloway
and Bridget Holloway.
And I am Apparently Autistic. Before we get started, just a quick reminder. We're not experts in anything except our own personal experiences and perspectives.
Be sure to check out the important disclaimers and disclosures in the show notes.
Now let's dive in. Okay, here we are. First episode of our podcast.
Yep.
So be nice to us. We intended to talk about what autism is and our autism story. And then a certain official had to start talking about autism and say dumb things. So we decided we needed to talk about that first. So that's going to be the main topic of our podcast. Obviously, we want to introduce the whole podcast to you guys. So
yeah,
we'll start off with there.
First, we're going to start off with the meaning of our podcast name and where we got Apparently Autistic.
So yeah, that came from the fact that I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure myself out, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like apparently I'm autistic, or I'm apparently autistic. So that kind of has that good alliteration to it. And then, of course, was the tongue-in-cheek reference where people are always like, you don't look autistic. So, well, I'm apparently autistic. So that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah.
Alliteration, the kind of I guess I'm autistic kind of thing. So yeah, that's where the name came from. Certainly isn't meant to offend anyone. I don't really think people look autistic. I certainly don't think I look autistic, but
what does it look like anyway? It's just like with anything else.
Yep.
It's like there's not a mold.
Right.
So
now as far as the goals for our podcast, our main goal is to try to educate people who are wanting to learn more about autism. And our goal is to use scholarly sources if we're talking about real specific things.
Yeah.
But also
on this podcast, we plan to share personal experiences, give examples of things that we've been through ourselves, and share different neurodivergent and neurotypical perspectives, not even just our own, but we hope to get perspectives from other people and other experiences as well.
All right. And then we want to discuss strategies to help everybody involved, like the autistic person, strategies to overcome some of the difficulties, to predict some of the traits and some of the issues that we have, like meltdowns, whatever, and we'll go more into those. Predict and prevent some of them, and then just how to like self-care and support you while you're going through that.
And then also for the neurotypical partner or caregiver or family member, friend, whoever the person may be, we want to give information to help understand and support people in our lives, and also self-care for us, because it's a whole family effort, a whole community effort, really, and everybody needs to be cared for. There's not one person that's more important than the other. It's a team effort.
Right. And I mean, I understand that if I'm in a meltdown or a burnout or sometimes, or if I'm just, really have black and white thinking or whatever, I'm not always easy to deal with. And I understand that.
Yeah.
So it's good to talk about ways to support caregivers and partners and stuff.
Yeah.
So why are we doing the podcast now? I've been autistic for my whole life. I've known it for at least 3 years now.
Yeah.
And I guess this isn't even really true over the last 3 years, but there's just rampant misinformation in the world today.
Yeah.
In general. And especially about autism.
Well, and I think part of plays into people just becoming more aware, but also, like, I know it's cliche, but we live in the information age. And videos and recordings and news, it's just everywhere. Everybody sees it more now than they ever did. So something new comes up and it's like it's new, and this really, no, it's not new. We're just learning more and more about it. So
Right. And part of the problem too is just because someone has a platform where more people will hear them does not mean that they're an expert, which is kind of what we're going to be getting to in this episode too. So it's important to try to correct the misinformation that's out there, especially for the people who seem to want to just believe something because this person has a bigger platform or more people believe it. And there's a lot of that when it comes to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I saw it on the internet. It says it's true. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Just because you have a louder voice, a bigger microphone doesn't mean that you're putting the right information out over
Right.
that microphone.
And so like some of those misinformation things that we'll be talking about, especially part of it today, is the connection of autism and vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
That just won't go away. It's been debunked for decades, I think, at least years.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't go away. And then, of course, the connection of is it a disease? Is it a neurotype? Is it a disorder? Is it a disability? You know, and there's a lot of different ways to look at it. A lot of ways, you know, I wouldn't say it's a disability by itself. If the world were made for autistic people, it wouldn't be a disability for us. It's more the world that we have to live in.
Yeah. See, and I think
the
that's
disability.
part of that is where the spectrum comes into, because I think for some it can be a disability,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the severity and where they're at on the spectrum. But it's not a full disability. It would be a disability for specific things that they have to do in their life, specific tasks, specific everyday
Specific needs,
Yeah,
specific
yeah.
support needs.
Exactly.
Yep. So, okay, let's get to the elephant in the room, the current autism news. Some of you may have already seen the video that I put out that I just couldn't wait to put out because it was ridiculous. And that's kind of why we wanted to get our first episode out this month since it's Autism Acceptance Month. But we really wanted to get it out quick after all the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
So
the way that things took a left turn, we figured we couldn't wait to get the episodes out in the order we wanted to. So we're kind of jumping onto this one while it's on everyone's mind, and then we'll get back to the drawing board with what we had.
And the good news is we practically have a whole other episode already written up and ready to go.
It's true.
We can record that one pretty quick. So anyways, I think everybody who's watching this, who's interested in autism, already knows the whole Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is the Health and Human Services Secretary now. His first press conference, he said a whole lot of very incorrect things about autism. And what spurred this on in the first place was that the CDC released a report stating that there was an increase in autism diagnosis by the age of 8 years old. And that is now 1 in 31 children that are 8 years old are diagnosed with autism. So, kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. Let me pull up the results here first. Use the clicking. So the report says among children aged 8 years in 2022, ASD prevalence was 32.2 per 1,000 children, or 1 in 31, across the 16 sites. And these are the sites that they did the study at. Mm-hmm. Ranging from 9.7 in Texas, Laredo, to 53.1 in California. And again, I think that's per 1,000. The overall observed prevalence estimate was similar to estimates calculated by Bayesian hierarchical and random effects models. I don't even know what that means. The study did show that it is also 3.4 times as prevalent among boys than girls. And overall, ASD was lower among non-Hispanic white children than among Asian or Pacific Islanders, American Indian or Alaska Natives, or non-Hispanic Black or African Americans. And then, basically, non-Hispanic white children have a lower prevalence of diagnosis, which honestly, I think that that's a good thing. Not because I think white kids should have less, but because it used to be a problem of getting anyone who wasn't white diagnosed. It used to be that the diagnosis criteria really only worked on white males, young white males.
Yeah.
So I think we've made some progress there. And that kind of goes over into the next discussion. First, let me pull this up. So I found this image. It kind of shows how ridiculous the media can be, because it says autism prevalence has increased 384% since 2000. That's not wholly accurate. Autism diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's not that autism is more prevalent. It's that diagnosis is more prevalent. And so what are some things that cause that? Like we talked about, better understanding, right?
Yeah. I mean, this image to me honestly is ridiculous, because it's like saying, I don't know, it's like saying the flu prevalence has increased 384% just because we started having flu tests and we're
Right.
now diagnosing it, and we're not saying, oh, they just got a stomach bug, or oh, they just have a chest cold.
Mhm.
We're actually labeling it and naming it and have some criteria to fit it into a category and say what it is.
Mhm.
And so now it's too much. No, we're
Well-
just saying what it is.
And isn't it interesting? And I'm going to really try hard to not be political.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't about politics. It's just about misinformation and correct information.
Right.
But the same administration was in power during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and his answer for how to reduce the number of people diagnosed with COVID was stop testing people.
Yeah.
It's the same idea here.
Yeah.
Like, just because you're testing fewer people doesn't mean fewer people have COVID.
Right. It's the idea of just being blind to it,
Mhm.
putting on blinders. Like, oh, if we don't have the positive test results, it doesn't exist.
So we have more testing going on. We have better testing going on. And the big thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is that just back in 2013, they actually broadened the definition of autism spectrum disorder. It now includes people who were diagnosed as Asperger's.
Mm-hmm.
It includes, let me find it, because I found that. Okay. So it now includes Asperger's, child disintegrative disorder, and pervasive development disorder, not otherwise specified, as well as some other neurodivergent things that were all considered their own thing, but are now
Part of
autism spectrum disorder. So already you're going to increase the number of diagnoses.
Right.
And on top that, it's better understood, better tested, and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And this is still a very, very new thing.
Yeah.
The first person ever diagnosed with autism was diagnosed in 1943.
Yeah.
He just died 2 years ago.
Not that long.
Yeah. Patient 1 just barely passed away. So this is not a...
And I think even that is misleading, because he wasn't patient 1. That's just where
Right.
the research and the
He was the first
acknowledgement
one
and recognition
identified as...
started.
Yeah. Yeah, and because, like, I have an ancestor that wrote a very good detailed history of his life.
Mhm.
And reading that book, I'm like, yeah, pretty sure that's David Black's history too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure that's how it came down.
You
Right.
see
Yeah.
traits and things from people way further back than
Mhm.
1942, but 42, right?
43.
43. Anyways, way further back, and you go, oh, this isn't new.
So, what we're going to do next is we're going to play RFK Jr.'s statement, about 30 minutes long. We're not going to play all 30 minutes, but we will watch all 30 minutes and react. We'll break in there and react. We'll cut it down to whatever matters.
And just as kind of a side note for our podcast here, for those who are going, 30 minutes, I don't have that to commit to adding on top of this. Our podcast in general, we're going to try to keep episodes to 30 to 45 minutes. There might be the occasional subject that we go a little bit longer on, but I mean, everybody has busy lives, and we think this is an important subject, so we want to keep it, in bite-sized pieces for everybody. So I just wanted to kind of throw that.
Yeah, I kind of would be okay with 45 minutes to an hour, but yeah. We certainly don't want
Yeah.
it going a lot longer.
Right.
So what I'm doing is setting up the screen recorder so that we can play back this for you guys once we have it all together. So here we go. This is his remarks.
The ASD prevalence rate in 8-year-olds is now 1 in 31. Shocking. There's an extreme risk for boys. Overall, the risk for boys of getting an autism diagnosis in this country is now 1 in 20.
Okay, so already the language.
Mm-hmm.
Shocking. Extreme risk. It's not a risk.
No.
It's a likelihood.
Yeah.
It's just a statistic, not a risk.
Right.
And it's really not that shocking. Again, if you understand what's going on, how science progresses, how understanding things go.
Mm-hmm.
And as high in California, which has the best data collection. So it probably also reflects the national trend, 1 in 12.5 boys.
I kind of agree with him there because California probably has a lot more progressive
That's what I was just going to say. I would like to
diagnoses
see,
and studies and stuff.
yeah, I would like to see a comparison of progressive areas versus conservative areas and see the diagnosis rate. Like, are we still behind in acknowledging it in some areas?
That was actually in here. Let's see, where was it? Yeah. In Laredo, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
clearly very conservative, 9.7 out of 1,000 children.
Mm-hmm.
In California, 53.1.
Right. This 1 in 31 number is an average.
Right.
So obviously there's some areas that are much higher and some that are still.
Which means if we get testing better in all the country, including the areas where it's not done as well, that's going to make the prevalence go up again. And it's not an epidemic.
Yeah.
It's
just acknowledgement.
It's just we're testing it better.
Yeah.
This is part of an unrelenting upward trend. The prevalence 2 years ago was 1 in 36. Since the first ADDM report in 1990, which was 1992 births, autism has increased by a factor of 4.8. That's 480%, I believe. The first ADDM survey was 22 years ago when prevalence was 1 in 150 children. In all the core states, the trend is consistently upward, and most cases now are severe.
That is just completely unbacked by anything.
Okay.
Most cases are severe because, think about it, that's why we have more people diagnosed. The severe cases, as people say, or the higher support need cases, are ones that have always been identified.
They're the ones that we're getting diagnosed.
Yeah, they've been identified clearly. So having more diagnoses is not more severe cases or whatever they want to say.
Just acknowledging that certain things. You know what stuck out in that to me?
What?
Is the 1 in 100 and was it 150?
Yeah,
150 that was diagnosed before.
Yeah.
That just tells me how many kids didn't get the support they needed.
Right.
They were like shoved into the mold of, fit these. And I think that you fall into that category, like follow this mainstream educational lifestyle and you kind of have to learn to go with it or you're not successful. And not everybody's capable of just adapting to it or at least getting by. I wouldn't even say adapting to it, but just survival.
Well, and that's the thing too. The idea of some being capable and some not. That's where the high functioning versus low functioning labels are hurt.
Right.
Because high functioning to most people is a kid who doesn't cause you any grief because he's figured out how to just deal with it. And that is exhausting.
Yeah.
Like from personal experience, looking back and realizing I was masking and I was doing, it's exhausting. I didn't understand how everybody in the world wasn't as exhausted as I was.
Yeah.
Like, those with autism are nonverbal. non-toilet trained, and have other stereotypical features, headbanging, tactile and light sensitivities, stimming, toe walking.
So a lot of these are legitimate traits that some autistic kids have. But again, he's just, most people are like this.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous.
Further, sorry.
No, it's fine.
How dare he say that those are like debilitating things? Those are like at face value, those are things that family members and loved ones and people that care about you help you deal with in life. They're things we adapt to. They're like newborns also aren't toilet trained.
Right.
Geriatrics also have incontinence issues. We don't just toss them aside and be like, oh, they're a burden on society because they're not toilet trained. It's part of the human experience. And sorry.
No, it's fine.
Anyway.
Things that I think that we need to move away from today is this ideology that the autism diagnosis, that the autism prevalence increases, the relentless increases, are simply artifacts of better diagnoses, better recognition, or changing diagnostic criteria. If you look at Table 3 of the ADDM report, it's clear that the rates are real, that they are increasing in the last 10 years, which is
again, like, if you wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, he just shot that out of the water.
Yeah. Because
he said, we need to stop thinking that it's this thing that science tells us it is. Because again, you're the head of the Health and Human Services. That is an inherently scientific role, scientific department. And we need to dismiss science and just go, well, look at it. It just looks staggering. It's like all these words that he's using.
Buzzwords, for sure.
It's the typical, I don't need to know the data. I just, it just feels right to me,
Right.
I think Stephen Colbert called that truthiness.
Yeah.
Beginning with the first one, year by year, there is a steady, relentless increase.
Over and over.
I want it because this epidemic denial has become a feature in the mainstream media, and it's based on an industry canard. And obviously, there are people who don't want us to look at environmental exposures, and so I
just want to highlight the irony of an administration that denied the COVID epidemic, saying that other people are denying this epidemic. You have a clearly infectious disease, and then you have a neurotype
that's killing hundreds of thousands of people.
Right, the disease that's killing, killed millions of people.
Yeah,
and you have a neurotype that is inconvenient for some people.
Yeah.
So it's an epidemic. Right?
Well, see, and I just, as we were watching that last little bit, it occurred to me that they're calling it an epidemic and saying, oh, it's real. These numbers are increasing. Like, they want credit for acknowledging the increased diagnoses without acknowledging what it actually means.
Yeah. And in researching for this episode, I looked at a lot of different articles. I like to look at my news. I like to look at conservative news sources. I like to look at progressive ones. I like to look at, middle ones. You can learn a lot if you understand their spin and their lane anyways.
Yeah.
But more interesting was the comment by people on them. And it saddened me to see a lot of people who are clearly parents of autistic kids saying finally they're realizing it's an epidemic. And it's like, I can kind of understand maybe thinking, please tell me there's a cure to this so that I don't have to live this life and my child doesn't have to live this life.
Yeah.
But that's a really negative way to look at something instead of looking for the positives of it and how that makes everybody better,
I'm looking for how we just adapt to it and accept it as part of our lives, then yeah, because there's so many incredible people that have these, like limitations in any form, and we just put the cap on them, and it's just not fair.
Yep. And when you have someone like this in a position like this, it really is the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's teaching other people who don't know that he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, and it's interesting to me because in our situation, you're like the one who, when you learn about something new, you look for books and resources, and like you want to read all these things, and you read nonfiction for pleasure, and it's just not me. That's not how I am. So, we'll talk more about this, but when we first started looking into an autism as a possibility for you, it was like you couldn't get enough. Like you wanted to learn all about it, and I learned a lot from you. But because I'm not the person that would do that, if I was one of those parents and I was hearing, oh, they're finally acknowledging this, and I hadn't done the research and learned the things that you've taught me and that you've dug into and learned from a neutral perspective, kind of just to get educated on it, or a scientific perspective, I would be more inclined to believe that, oh, they're finally acknowledging the epidemic. Now where do we go?
Yeah.
So,
by the way, if you think you're autistic and you dive into research to find out if you're autistic, you're autistic.
Probably true.
Probably.
Just read you some of the little excerpts from some of the older studies. The baseline for autism in this country was established.
We need to get rid of the ideas that we have now based on current information. And let me read you some of the old studies.
Let's go backward.
Because that's somehow, it comes from this ridiculous idea that science is a conspiracy to dupe everybody into something. And the other idea that science keeps changing drastically, and the media doesn't help with that. They're like, oh, new thing, blah, someone puts out one paper about something and they think scientists have changed their mind. And then they also drastically over exaggerate the significance of this new whatever. So it's, let's go back to the old stuff because we like that. It makes sense to us. Like we can understand it.
Repeating history has always worked so well for us.
Right. What could go wrong, right?
With the largest epidemiological study in history, a study of all 900,000 children in the state of Wisconsin, children under the age of 12, they found 0.7 children had autism in every 10,000. That's less than 1 in 10,000. Today, we're 1 in 31.
Again, it's like, let's go back to when we were not as good at recognizing it, understanding it, and diagnosing it.
Why is this even part of this newscast? Like, why? Let's read old data.
Right. Well, because it's the news conference of this report came out. We can twist it the way we want, and we'll pull.
Yeah, but
again, because
just
to someone who doesn't understand how everything works, who doesn't understand science, who doesn't understand research, who doesn't understand any of that stuff, and you just show them, you just say what he just said, and you go, "Oh my gosh, what is happening?" Now everybody has autism, and
it's dangerous.
Like, no,
is what it is.
It really is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That study also confirmed the 4-to-1 male to female ratio.
We can make this up.
There were at that time just over 60 children in Wisconsin with autism. And today it's around 20,000.
The diagnostic criteria better fits boys.
In 1987, there was another exhaustive study, a peer-reviewed study in North Dakota, set out to count every child in the state with a pervasive developmental disorder, including autism. That study meticulously combed through every record, every diagnosis, And he even conducted in-person assessments of the entire population of 180,000 children under 18.
Population.
The autism rate they found was 3.3 per 10,000. So that's in line with the 1 in 10,000 that was found in Wisconsin.
All right, let's pretend for a second that these people actually went and talked to every single child under the age of 18 in this population that they were talking, 180,000.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that in 1987 they talked to 180,000 kids and didn't find as many of them to be autistic does not mean that they weren't. It means that the understanding of what autism was in 1987 was not as advanced as it is now.
Yeah.
As like everything that he's using as this is proof that it's not about what we know and that we understand it better. Like all of his examples of why that isn't the case is literally evidence that that is the case.
Yeah.
It's
Well, and even just thinking back to like elementary school and growing up, like I could probably name, and I never would, but I could name names of kids in my classes that probably fall into the autism spectrum. I never heard of autism until I was well into my adulthood.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even know what it was. So it just wasn't.
Yeah. I think that there are a lot of friends of mine
Mm-hmm.
that are likely on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if you get a neurotypical and a neurodivergent person trying to communicate and have fun and whatever, there's a communication difficulty there.
Yeah.
And it's not one can't communicate and one can. It's they communicate
Differently, yeah.
So when you have an autistic person and they have friends that they, are on the same wavelength with, got news for you, buddy.
You're right. You just stick to people that are like you, and that holds true even when you don't even know what like you means,
Mhm. What's funny is when you said you didn't even know what autism was, I remember when I was really young hearing someone talking about autism or whatever, and I asked my parents what autism. Then their explanation was, well, like autistic people, when they're watching a movie, they won't actually like pay attention to the main characters. They look at what's going on in the background. And I was like, that's really weird. And then the only other explanation was all of their senses are extremely heightened, which our senses are heightened. Not really to the degree that I thought they were saying they were.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just I don't have a frame of reference for everyone else's senses.
Yeah,
maybe.
so.
Anyway.
Wisconsin 17 years earlier. For context, today, the last number of 1 in 36 is 83 times higher. In 1987, out of 1 million, every 1 million kids, 330 were diagnosed with autism. Today, there are 27,777 for every million. If you accept the epidemic deniers narrative, you have to believe that researchers in North Dakota missed 98.8% of the children with autism. That thousands of profoundly I believe it.
Like, how is that hard to believe?
It's just basic science and math.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand what even the question is. But
if you believe the epidemic denier, then you're going to tell me that those people just missed that many autistic kids. That's the point.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
And you understand that that's what we're saying. And then are you going, but this old data says otherwise. Oops, did I do that?
Disabled children were somehow invisible to doctors, teachers, parents, and even their own study.
Let's talk about invisible to parents.
right.
Okay.
That's what I was going to say. When you said you heard of autism when you were younger, I was going to say it's because your mom worked with autistic kids. She was a teacher's aide. So, of course, you heard about it when you were younger.
I think the time I was talking about was before that. But yeah. But yeah, talk about invisible to parents. Yeah. My mom was a teacher's aide. She was an inclusion aide. Her job was to help autistic kids, or I think she had some other kids with high support needs with other conditions.
Yeah.
And, but she worked with a lot of autistic kids.
Yeah.
She knew autistic kids. But again, back then she knew a certain support need.
That's what I was going
level
to say.
of
To be
autistic kids.
completely fair, back then, the ones that were diagnosed were the ones with more extreme needs. And so your needs didn't meet that level. So she went, no.
Because the autistic kids she knew
Yeah.
needed an inclusion aid to help them get through
constant
school and
support.
stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how you're invisible.
Yeah.
You're not really invisible, but your autism is.
Yeah.
Like
the same researchers who followed the original cohort for 12 years to double check their number, they went back in 2000 and found that they had missed exactly one child. So doctors and therapists in the past were not stupid. They weren't missing all these cases.
See, this is how you also spread or back up your misinformation. Well, you're calling those doctors stupid, and doctors aren't stupid. Okay. Well, doctors today are telling you that what you're saying is wrong. So
are you saying they're
we
stupid?
can't call doctors in the 80s stupid, which we're not anyways, but that's offensive to call them stupid. But he's literally calling today's doctors, today's researchers stupid.
Yeah.
Like, you can't have it both ways.
And really, you could have it. The ones now are presenting new, accurate, advanced, developed.
Because as with anything that we research, we continue to learn more about it.
Right.
We continue to hone what we understand about it.
And the ones back then also gave everything that they had because it wasn't as developed back then. So, oh my goodness, neither one of them was doing anything nefarious.
Right. It's just when it's new, you recognize the easily recognized case.
Yeah.
And as the years go on, you start to recognize the nuances and the slight differences and the things that make it up. Yeah.
The epidemic is real.
No.
Between 1959 and 1965, researchers from 14 hospitals associated with major universities undertook the national collaboration.
Okay, I'll be honest with you. I feel like we need to get past him just reading all these old studies. And it's not because if you want to read his studies, watch the video. I'm not discouraging anyone from reading studies because they're all important. But you need to understand the context. Data without context is not anything. It's not going to help you understand anything. There are certain things that he said in this that I really wanted to play so that we can discuss it and not just him trying to go through these studies and figure out how to make
I think we could do this all day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. This is like a 30-minute thing.
So
and it's like, so much longer. So let me see.
Charge the Mind Institute at UC Davis with because this myth was already becoming pervasive, the myth of epidemic denial was already becoming pervasive in the mainstream media. The California legislature directed the Mind Institute at UC Davis to answer the question. And Irva Hertz-Pichota was a highly esteemed, revered scientist, neurology, and epidemiologist, came back with a definitive answer. The epidemic is real. Only a very, very small portion of it can be changed to can be charged to better recognition or better diagnostic criteria. I want to say a couple of other things. There are many, many other studies that affirm this. And instead of listening to this canard of epidemic denial, all you have to do is start reading a little science because the answer is very clear. And this is catastrophic for our country. There's a reason.
Okay, here's what you have to understand about reading science. If you're going to read science, you need to read all of it. If you're going to read a study, which learning to be able to read studies is definitely a skill that you can learn.
Yeah.
Understanding where to find stuff, because the study is written for other scientists to fully understand the stuff.
Right.
You have to usually, if you can find the abstract, they can break it down and say, this is what we basically found. But if you're going to, he is taking results from studies and then clearly not paying attention to the interpretation. Every study will show you the results, and then the people who are doing the study will tell you the right way to interpret
This
it.
is what that means.
Because again, data without context, anyone can change it, can make it mean whatever they want it to mean, unless you understand the context. So yeah, read studies, but read all of it. Understand where the people who are actually studying it came from. You can't accept their data, but then dismiss their conclusion based on that data. I'm going to try to bring up this other video that I had queued up that had, I think it was a shorter clip of the key points, and I kind of want to get to those. And I think it's in this video. Let's play this.
The Health and Human Services Secretary pointed to the CDC's own data, showing autism prevalence increased from 1 in 150 8-year-olds in 2000 to 1 in 31 in 2022. Then he offered his own theory for the rise without proof.
This is a preventable disease. We know it's an environmental exposure. It has to be. Genes do not cause epidemics.
Here's what I love. We know it's an environmental exposure. That is a statement that should be backed by actual data and research and all of this stuff. And the very next thing he says is, it has to be.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not, we've done the research. It's these people. There are a lot of people who genuinely are like, how do you not see that it is obviously this thing?
Yeah.
And it's like, because the research says otherwise.
Right.
As one of my favorite scientists says, the universe is under no obligation to make sense.
Right.
So just because it doesn't make sense does not mean it's false. And just because you think it makes sense does not mean it's true.
Well, human nature is to fill in those gaps. So like our brains want us to make it make sense, and it can't always make sense. So you get things like, it has to be.
Right.
Why?
Dr. Zach Warren, one of the authors of the CDC report, says there is no one answer, but the best science so far points to genetics.
We have data that a certain percentage of some types of autism can be clearly explained by genetic differences. We have other evidence suggesting that actually it's the complex interplay of environmental factors and all of those things that can influence brain development that we'll need to understand as well.
This is exactly what I was talking about. He's using the CDC's latest report as evidence for the fact that it's an epidemic and it's got to be an environmental exposure. It can't be genetics. And then we talked to one of the actual authors of the study that he used, and they're like, we know genetics plays a huge part. I don't think there's anyone who knows what they're talking about that says it's only genetic, because that's not been the thing either. It's obviously a very complex thing to understand. I think if it was just genetics, we'd have identified that gene and at least had a better understanding about it.
Yeah, probably.
But
it's a complex puzzle, just like it's a complex spectrum.
Right. But that's exactly, I mean, that was like, I didn't watch all these ahead of time. But that's exactly what I was saying. He's using the study and the data from the study, but he's not using the conclusions. He's not, he doesn't understand the right context. But when you talk to someone who actually wrote the report and they give you the context, you see it clearly.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Is it a preventable disease?
I think it's really challenging to answer that question because autism isn't actually a single thing, right? Autism is a word that we use as a best attempt to capture a wide variety of wonderfully unique children with strengths, developmental vulnerabilities. And
Kennedy painted a bleak picture for those with autism.
And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date.
Sam Branson has a PhD in physics and is an autism researcher. Both Sam and his 7-year-old son have autism.
So I was thinking while we were doing this, I should try to find that picture of me in my little baseball uniform PJs that I always insisted on wearing to baseball games. That was like, I loved baseball.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of my special interests. Still is.
Yeah.
So to say that autistic kids never, like, it's just bizarre what he's saying. Like,
Yeah.
you're demonstrating that you don't understand. If his limited idea of what autism is were true, then the prevalence wouldn't be anywhere near what it is.
Yeah.
Because it's just not true for the vast majority of people who are autistic. It's just like, that describes high support needs autistic.
Right.
And there are plenty of us who some days we might fit in that category for some of the things, and other days we don't.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing that people don't understand. This is not a constant thing.
Yeah.
You're not constantly high support needs or constantly low support needs necessarily.
Even for people who are constantly high support needs, like I think about the parents of those special needs children and things like that. Like, it just still is baffling to me that he frames it the way he does, because those kids still provide joy and light and laughter and love and like a huge piece of their loved ones' lives. Like, you can't even describe that, or you could never replace it. It's not
right. And he says it destroys families. I don't know if that was in that clip.
I haven't seen it on
yet, but yeah, he says it destroys families. And it's no doubt if you're a new parent, a relatively new parent, young parent, whatever, and you've never had any understanding of what autism is, you've never had any, reason to understand it because it's never touched you directly, and you get told that your child's autistic, and you get told things that doctors will tell you, like, he'll never learn to talk and things like that. I can understand that's being devastating, but there's a big difference between devastating when you first learn it and you don't understand it, and destroying
your life. Yeah.
Destroying families.
Right. Right. And I think it's devastating in the scenario you gave, in the sense that it's so unknown. Like, once you start to know and live through it, you're like, okay, we can manage this.
Right.
But it's just the unknown part of it that's devastating. And for a lot of us who don't have a lot of exposure to autism, there's so much unknown.
The most ridiculous part to me is they can't hold jobs and they don't pay tax. First of all, don't get me started on paying taxes by people like RFK Jr. and rich people who pay very little taxes. But there are a lot of autistic people who hold jobs. And that may be range from, working as a stalker in a grocery store to, I guarantee you, there's plenty of people at NASA that are autistic. I work at a major airline. I guarantee you there's plenty of my coworkers that are autistic, many of whom probably don't know it.
But the irony of that is in our society, the people who work at NASA or PhDs and do research and whatever still go to the grocery store and grab a box of cereal off the shelf. That person that stocks the shelves is still a necessary part of our world.
Exactly.
Like, those jobs aren't any less important. We still all use those services.
Like, his list of things that make autism devastating shows that there's this idea in our society, in our capitalist society, that if you can't provide a way to create profit or to create value, monetary value, then you're not a value to society.
Yeah.
And it's just so backwards. Okay, I think we've kind of talked about that, like his specific thing. I want to get into, so there were some responses from the autistic community. You guys probably saw mine. There were a lot similar to that. Like, I watched a lot of videos that were the same thing. Hey, it didn't destroy our family. Hey, I'm autistic. I have a job. I pay taxes. I do it. Like, it's just, it's silly. So, the first response I want to pull up is by the Autism Self-Advocacy Network. Now, this is a group that is run by autistic people. The leader of ASAN is autistic. The one of their mottos is nothing about us without us. It's like there are some other autistic organizations out there that like to speak about autism that I'm talking about autism speaks. They don't have a lot of actually autistic people on their board. They don't have a lot of actually autistic people involved in deciding what is important to them and what will help autistic people. So groups like Autism Self-Advocacy Network are important. So they originally put out a statement just based on the report, and then RFK decided to talk. And so they decided to update their statement. And I'll start reading through here if I want you to pick up where I left off.
Okay.
On the morning of April 16th, Secretary Kennedy held a press conference in response to the ADDM report. This press conference followed a statement published through the Department of Health and Human Services on the day of the ADDM release. In both his statement and his press conference, Kennedy repeated false claims that autism was a preventable epidemic and that the ADDM report findings could not be explained by improved access to screening. Autism is not a disease. Let's say that again. Autism is not a disease. You cannot catch autism. It is genetic. We are born autistic and are autistic our whole lives. Autism is a normal part of life. You cannot prevent or cure autism, and you should not try to. It is a waste of time and money and harms autistic people. We know this because research aimed at finding the causes of autism has been a major focus of research for decades, even today. Biology, genetic, and environmental factors research continues to be the overwhelming majority of research about autism. Less than 5% of all federal funding on autism research has ever gone towards studying autism across the lifespan. That is to say, research about autistic adults. This biased perspective leads to rhetoric like Kennedy's statements, which entirely ignore autistic adults and our thoughts about our existence. The Secretary clearly believes that we have no business speaking out about what helps us and what harms us. Kennedy misinterprets the basic science to make people feel afraid of more autistic people across different identity groups getting a diagnosis. And again, remember I kept, like, his words were very clearly intended to cause fear.
Yeah.
He responds with shock and horror to the increased number of diagnoses in autistic people of color. The Secretary cherry-picks the information we have about autism diagnosis across history to make it seem as though this change is alarming. In reality, we've historically had a diagnostic disparity. For most of our history, clinicians have diagnosed white people as autistic far more often than anyone. Like I said earlier. This is for many reasons. One is that the way we diagnose autism was designed specifically around young white autistic boys. While there have been some changes to the diagnostic criteria since autism first started being diagnosed, the testing itself holds that bias. This has meant that it came down to the individual person doing the diagnosis to adjust for things like cultural differences in communication style, differences in how women, men, and others are raised to behave, and age, among other factors. We're only just starting to change how diagnosis works. What has changed a lot over time we started diagnosing autism is access to health coverage, Medicaid expansion, the Affordable Care Act, the creation of state insurance mandates for autism, guidance for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services on early and periodic screening, diagnosis, and testing, and dozens of federal grants and programs all have made Americans more likely to have access to care, including a diagnosis. That change is likely a big part of why, for the first time, we're seeing kids of color be diagnosed with autism at higher rates than their white peers in some age groups. It's not that the amount of autism in the population has changed. It's that more people are getting the tools necessary to get a diagnosis. This is because of hard work and investment by doctors, scientists, and policymakers to make sure that kids get tested and are able to get support as soon as possible. This is a good thing. It means that more people have a chance to get resources like home and community-based services and accommodations at work and school. More than that, It gives people access to community with other autistic people. Knowing that you are autistic means knowing that you aren't broken. It can help you and others understand the different ways you experience and perceive the world around you. This includes a full spectrum of support needs that can vary from person to person, which society should accommodate. With his statement, Secretary Kennedy attempts to contradict and overrule the report issued by an agency under his control. He ignores the science and research done by the CDC in order to push his own dangerous agenda. This is the public health crisis our nation is facing. Between his comments, the hiring of a known quack who conducted harmful experiments on autistic children, and Kennedy's repeated claims that we would have answers to the cause of autism by September, something impossible to do accurately. Kennedy is waging war on public health information about autism and autistic people. These attacks on autistic people are part of a greater effort by him and the administration to undermine health and civil rights of people with disabilities and other marginalized communities. Kennedy has undertaken mass firings in an attempt to drastically reorganize the Department of Health and Human Services. This would leave critical health programs unable to operate, including the very efforts that have expanded screening and diagnostic tools for autism. The dismantling of HHS, the attack on Medicaid and the ACA Medicaid expansion, and the promotion of misinformation about infectious diseases and vaccinations set progress back decades and put all of us at greater risk of serious illness and death. The administration's actions speak far louder than their words. In attempting to declare a word on autism, they've shown what they're actually doing, villainizing autistic people, treating us like a disease or a burden on society, instead of living people who exist and have our own thoughts and ideas about our disabilities, weaponizing pity and fear to deny our basic rights. Claims that we are incapable of working, creating art, or forming relationships all serve as excuses to deny us the very supports we need to thrive in our communities. Together, this is all a smokescreen to try to get people to think that this administration cares about us while they cut the services we rely on to survive, cut funding to the people who enforce the civil rights of disabled students, and try to dismantle the agencies that allow us to live freely in the community. This administration is made up of the same people who say we should go back to institutions. It is made up of the same people who claim that we are the reason planes crash, rather than their cuts to regulatory bodies for airlines. It is run by the same man who reportedly said his family member with a developmental disability should just die. The administration's blustering about the cause of autism is an attempt to distract us from those truths. We will not be fooled. We will not be silenced. Autistic children become autistic adults. We are part of natural human genetic diversity. Manipulating and lying about the data to justify policies that harm our community will not work. Nothing about us without us. A bit longer than I thought it would be, but it's still
Very important.
very important.
Yeah.
And I think, he just goes over a lot of the same things that I know that a lot of people with autism know, because especially once you're diagnosed, if you're a late diagnosed, it becomes one of your special interests. Autism Society of America also had a response. So the president of Autism Society of America did an interview on CNN. We'll play it.
A CDC study released in just the last few hours finds that the autism rate in the United States is still rising. But experts say that these findings actually reflect positive trends from increased awareness and better screening. The CDC found in 2022 about 1 in every 31 children was diagnosed with autism by the age of 8. In 2020, it was 1 in 36. Some other conclusions include that the
This reminded me too. And we didn't see it in the clip because we didn't watch all of it like we said we were going to. But the study talks about the prevalence of diagnosis in children by the age of 4 versus by the age of 8. So in other words, are we catching it or identifying it earlier? And Kennedy implies that because there's less prevalence at the age of 4 than there is at the age of 8, they're catching it between the age of 4 and 8. Like the children are somehow catching autism between the age of 4 and 8. Not that we didn't catch it in all those kids by the time they were 4, we did catch it by the time they were 8. No, that must clearly mean, because it has to, it must mean that they actually caught it. And that reminded me of that
Meaning
point.
like contracted.
Yeah, like they contracted it.
Yeah.
Like that, because that supports it's got to be an environmental toxin idea.
This is more common in boys than girls. It's also more common among Asian, Black, and Hispanic children than among white kids. Joining me now to discuss is Christopher Banks, the CEO of the Autism Society of America. Sir, thank you so much for being with us. Talk to us about what this new data represents. Do we understand these shifts?
Well, thank you for having the Autism Society to join you today. I think we understand several things about the shift that you just spoke about. We see an increase in access to diagnosis. We see an increase in understanding more about autism and the condition. And so I think that leads to a portion of the increase. I think we're seeing a greater effort in more states, and we're testing more children than we have before. That's also very important. We've also expanded it, as you said. It's 1 in 31 for 8-year-olds, and it's 1 in 34 for 4-year-olds. For many, many years, we were only testing and looking at a certain set. Now we have expanded that. So we've expanded the states and the locations for testing, and we are including many individuals who were not tested before in previous communities. As you just spoke about, the Black community and other groups had not been tested in the past.
Is there anything in the data that shines a light on the causes of autism beyond, or rather the cause of the prevalence of autism beyond additional screening? Is there something happening, whether related to diet or the fact that folks are having kids later in life? What is happening that's leading to the increase in rates beyond screening?
Well, we know there's a lot of research going on right now to understand more of that. In fact, I am talking to you from Doha, Qatar, where there is an autism tech conference occurring with a lot of understanding about genomes and about genetics and getting more understanding about that. There are a lot of contributing issues that are looking at this, but there's no one singular way of looking at autism. There's no one singular cause. There's no one singular event. And if you know a little bit about the autism community, we know that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and because there are so many variables and personalities and types of individuals. So I think that it goes beyond just one specific thing.
Sure. I do wonder then what you make of this global effort by HHS to determine what they describe as the cause of the autism epidemic by September. That's only a few months away. And it seems as though if these resources could have been pulled together before to figure out a cause, that would have happened already.
Been looking for causes and for autism for decades. And I think it's important to be very clear here. Statements that we have seen this administration make are harmful. They're fear-based narrative, and it's not something that the administration seems to be willing to waver on. So let me be clear. Autism is not a chronic disease. It's a lifelong developmental condition. It's not an epidemic, nor should it be compared to the COVID pandemic. And using language like that perpetuates falsehoods, stigmas, and stereotypes. Autism is not linked to vaccines, and health policies should be rooted in science. Let me repeat that. Autism is not linked to vaccines, and the HHS needs to have policies that are rooted in fact-based, evidence-based science.
I'm going to stop it there.
Yeah.
Because that is like the perfect ending. And we were going to watch a clip of the CEO of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network on ABC, and it says a lot of the same thing.
Yeah.
And if you look at all these responses from all these autism groups, and I think we even had a statement put out that all of them signed on to.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to include links to all of this stuff in the show notes. The big thing that people need to understand that I wish RFK Jr. and the people leading the HSS or HHS understand is that you have to stick to evidence-based science. You have to stick to where the data and the evidence and all of that leads.
And the current data. You can't throw in the old data to make it seem like anything. It's current data because it's progressive.
It all builds on itself. It's not that we throw out the old data completely, because that's what the new data is built on.
Yeah.
But if you when I kind of went through my own awakening of learning things for myself and not just taking other people's word for it because I trusted them, I realized if you're ever in a situation where you're like, how do people not see this really obvious thing? It's probably not obvious. It's probably not even right. But you have created this scenario in your head where it has to be obvious.
Yeah.
And best case scenario, that's what's going on with Robert Kennedy Jr. That's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
And worst case scenario, it's part of a more sinister strategy to, like the ASAN said, to completely dismiss us. If you can make it seem hopeless, then you can make it seem pointless to support it.
Yeah. And so that's where it gets dangerous. You can't take away that support and that network, the care and stuff like that we've gotten to, because there's still a lot of areas that we're lacking in. And we have to keep building on that to get where we need to be. So
and when you have the Secretary of the Health and Human Services saying these things, the danger isn't just there and other people that will use it as an excuse to dismiss autistic people. The danger there is there's every day there's a parent who was just told that their child is autistic and they know nothing about autism. And so where are they going to go? They're going to go to the expert.
Yeah.
The leader of the Health and Human Services seems like they should be an expert who knows what they're talking about. And generally speaking, they are. But in this case, they're not. And that adds to the danger, because that's how the misinformation spreads.
Yeah.
It's way easier to spread this misinformation than the truth, because
I think it's from a reputable source.
And misinformation is almost always easier to believe. So,
because it's usually based on filling in those mind gaps.
So I think we covered quite a bit here. Final thoughts?
I just think it's so important for us to continue to learn and try to understand and stick with what we know about the people we love and the people that we have around us in our lives. We know that what he said isn't true. We know that it doesn't, and no two autistic people that we know fit the same mold. So it's not fair even from the get-go. So I just think it's important that we keep talking about these things and pushing for.
I would definitely echo that. I would want to my fellow autistics, I would want to say, do not let what some ignorant people say affect your mood, affect how you look at yourself. What's the word to say that? Or way to say it? Don't let it affect your own self-esteem. Don't let it affect your own self-image. You know who you are. The first time I heard about the things that he said that autistic kids couldn't do, it was just in writing. But just looking at that, I was like, this is utterly ridiculous. And those of us in the autism community know that. So just know that. Don't be afraid to speak up about it. Don't be afraid to tell people this is not accurate, because it's very important that we correct this misinformation and do whatever we can.
But by the same token, we don't all have the same voice. And if it bothers you, it's okay that it bothers you. That's valid too, because it's not okay. It's not accurate, and it's a misrepresentation. So
and you're absolutely right. There are a lot of autistic kids that don't have that voice. Or don't have the same voice, like you said. And that's kind of what we're doing this for. So that we can try to be a voice. I think that was a pretty good first episode. What do you think?
Yeah, I
think we still have a lot to work on.
for sure.
We have
Hopefully
to get more comfortable chairs.
It'll
This is
get
terrible.
smoother as we go, but
It's good that this is an autism podcast and that I'm state from the beginning that I'm autistic. That explains how and why I'm moving so much. How I have to reposition it everything.
I don't even notice it anymore. But
Right. Okay. So if you're still watching by now or listening, thank you very much. We
Yeah.
appreciate it. Please like and subscribe
yeah, thanks
wherever
for joining
you're
us.
wherever
Comment.
you're doing it from.
We're always open to your thoughts and
Yep.
feedback on.
Any comments, any feedback. Don't hesitate to just drop in the comment section your refutation of what he says autistics can't do. Tell us what you do that proves him wrong.
Yep.
And thereby tell other people.
But yeah, we'd love to hear it.
I think that'd be great. Next week, we're going to talk about what we were planning on talking. No, I don't know if it'll be next week. Our next episode, we may not have these on a great schedule
We'll
right
get
now.
on a schedule.
Yeah. But our next episode, we're going to talk about what was originally going to be our first episode, which is basically what is autism. And then we're going to talk about our autism story.
Yep.
Specifically. So again, as we said, like and subscribe this episode. Share this with other people that you think could benefit from just hearing other autistic voices. I know that was one of the great things when I started looking into autism. I wanted to hear other autistic voices.
Yeah.
And their family members, people who actually had real life experience with it. So, share it with people, like and subscribe, and check us out again when we put out another episode.
Yep. We'll look forward to it.
Yep. All right. We'll see you.
See ya.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare provider for diagnosis or treatment of autism or related condition.